Back once again. It's the only #1 live stream in Santa Cruz County for hot Google Slides. And I mentioned last time that we're going to start a new series, starting off a new season, starting off season 2 of the live stream. Starting off a new series with hopefully less inception, because the last series, as you remember, was on dream interpretation, but the dream interpretation only works if I'm not causing you to have weird dreams. So I'm going to try and get away from that. I'm going to try and incept you a little bit less. Now, these days we could all use a miracle, right? We could all use a good old miracle. Some people are interested, some people will want, a good miracle from Jesus' A game, like when he duplicated all these loaves and fishes to produce a delicious brunch for all of the guests at Canaan, or when he brought a dead man back to life, or any of those other amazing miracles which Jesus is alleged to do. But this is not really my jam at all. What we're going to be talking about in this next series of videos is actually the shitty miracles. Second string B-grade miracles that suck. Of Jesus, but also, maybe primarily, of other people post-Jesus. Today's going to be the intro to that series, and I do that by way of just saying a little bit about what a miracle is, or how we should talk about it. There's this famous definition that I think has kind of become even accepted nowadays, which originates in the milieu of the Enlightenment, and it's framed by David Hume as follows. A miracle is a violation of the laws of nature. Now, Hume is framing that definition in the context of an essay about why miracles can never happen. Why can they never happen? Because the laws of nature are supported by the universal testimony of all mankind. If you're getting testimony for a miracle, that is of necessity less than the universal testimony of all mankind, so miracles cannot happen. So this definition of miracles as a violation of the laws of nature is important for that logical proof that miracles can't happen and you shouldn't believe miracle stories. But obviously it kind of stacks the deck, right? It may well be true analytically, but it's not really helpful per se. Because for one thing, it's not really clear that there is a belief in laws of nature, or that nature is conceived of as having laws that are inviolable in the ancient world. And for another thing, although there are some miracles, like the miracle of Saint Menos, where a man gives birth to a chicken, which obviously do kind of, by our lights, break the laws of nature, there are going to be a lot of these crappy second string miracles that I'm going to be talking about over the next few weeks that don't really seem to violate the laws of nature. Maybe they give the laws of nature a nudge and a wink, but certainly not a violation of the laws of nature as David Hume conceived of it. Thinking about the ancient world, it might be more helpful to think about the etymology of some of the terms that are used to describe miracles or indicate miracles. Here are the Greek and Latin terms. When we talk about miracles in other traditions, we will talk about other terms for miracles. In a lot of the religious translations that are related to Greek and Latin, Old Nubian, for instance, the word for miracle is a gloss on these expressions. Thauma in Greek is going to be the oldest one. And that's related to this verb theaomai, to look at something. Right? A thauma is something that attracts your attention, something you look at. The Latin miraculum is kind of a gloss on that, or at least a close parallel to it. Comes from the word miror, which means basically the same thing as theaomai. You look at something. A miraculum is also something that you look at. The thauma and the miraculum are both things that draw our attention, things that make us look at them, compel our attention. Something that's neat and cool to look at. And the rules of what is neat or what is cool are usually kind of unarticulated in a culture, but it's interesting to know these rules because they can reveal all sorts of other things. Paying attention to what ancient people find neat, find cool to look at, gives us a sort of a special access to ancient minds. So that's why it's useful to look at miracles, and I think the point of view from which I'm going to be pursuing them here, figuring out why these things seem like worthy of attention to ancient observers. Well, if we're looking for really shitty miracles, where do we go? Where is the used car dealership of terrible miracles? Usually, and this may not surprise you, miracles that suck occur where sort of the more famous good miracles are, and that's in this kind of religious context. Predominantly a Christian late antique religious context, although we're going to go further afield from that as well, both in time and in space. But this kind of Christian late antique context of texts largely written in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th centuries CE by authors who identify themselves as Christian is where we find a lot of these stories. So we might ask why. Why are the stories in this particular corpus of texts? Why do Christian writers like to talk about miracles so much? And the first thing that might come to your mind, because you are living in the 21st century, is that miracles are supposed to be a kind of a proof that the religion that people believe in is true. Proof that you can offer someone else that your religion is true. This is the way that miracles kind of work in modern Christian culture, to the extent that that exists. There's this fantastic scam that dozens of people have done where they pretend that their child has had a near-death experience and seen heaven and come back from heaven, and that's a miracle. And the child will then describe heaven in a way that happens to agree with whatever particular sub-church doctrine the people in question believe in. And then they'll sell this story to ghostwriter or sell the movie rights, and suddenly you got Jennifer Garner acting in the role of the mother, and the kid is stuck with this kind of legacy for the rest of their lives. But that kind of miracle, this kind of miracle that says, hey, our faith is true, is not really, it's not really considered a miracle. To the extent that stories like that are told in the ancient world. There are some famous ones like the Vision of Saint Hermas, which was one of the most popular Christian texts in antiquity, but that wasn't considered a miracle. Those sorts of visions are not really miracles. And the miracles that do exist in the ancient world are not really, they don't serve the function, for the most part, of saying, hey, our faith is true. And not coincidentally, if you look at a lot of the texts written by Christians with a purported audience of Christians in mind, something like Tertullian's Apology for the Christian Religion, these texts tend to be miracle-free. They're not citing for a kind of non-Christian audience all of these miracles and saying, hey, believe in Christianity because of these miracles. And vice versa, anti-Christian texts do tend to mention Christian miracles. Things like Origen, to the extent that we can reconstruct, Celsus, Contra Christianos, which we reconstruct from Origen's refutation of it, one of the more vicious kind of anti-Christian tracts, point out that Christianity is a faith that's based on miracles. So miracles tend to discredit Christianity in these kind of interfaith debates more than they boost it. Why is that? Well, the miracle stories border on a couple of other kind of uncomfortable domains that Christians don't necessarily want to be associated with in the public mind. One of those is this world of kind of hucksterism and credulity that people like Lucian make fun of, because there are all these kinds of religious frauds going about in the 1st and 2nd century CE. setting up fake miracles, using things like statues that they make talk using the windpipes of cranes, or snake muppets, things like that. Um, I'm thinking of Lucian's Life of Alexander the False Prophet, but also a couple of other books of his. So you got hucksterism on the one hand, and you got magic on the other. So always want to be careful to differentiate between miracles and magic. And sometimes, as we'll see, you can't always tell the difference. Sometimes the devil is making the miracles happen, fake miracles. So because miracles are kind of uncomfortably like these other things, these other very attention-grabbing things, namely hucksterism and magic tricks, Christians maybe don't want to make their case, the case for their religion, on the basis of miracles to a non-Christian audience. Now, if we're talking about intra-religious arguments, arguments between Christians, that's where miracles really kind of loom large in this period. Because Christians, whatever they disagree about, share some basic ideas about the possibility of miracles, their cause, i.e. God causes them, they're not magic. So miracles can be very helpful, as we'll see, for kind of deciding debates, doctrinal debates, who's the heretic, who's the Catholic, who's got the real Christian belief, and anxieties, and also addressing the question of who's the most spiritual person, who's a good spiritual intercessor, who's got God's ear, right? You know that in order to become a saint nowadays in the Catholic Church, you gotta have a certain number of miracles credited to you, and that's a formalization of a procedure that's just getting its start in early Christianity, where you show that you are holy, that you're a kind of a saint, by showing that you can do miracles. So miracles have this kind of argumentative force within Christianity. And within that setting, of course, they're also not really unnatural, right? Because God does them. They're not violations of the natural order because God makes the world and he can do whatever he wants with it. This is the kind of doctrinal ground that Christians share on which these miracle stories thrive. Now, in that case, miracles are still marvelous. They're still attention-catching. To step outside the Greco-Roman and Christian tradition, the term for miracles in Arabic, or the terms that get used to describe the same kind of things, are ayat or bayan, signs or clear evidence. They are attention-grabbing ways for God to communicate with man. But to get into this mindset, you do have to believe in miracles. We have to, for the moment at least, suspend our Humean, modern post-Enlightenment disbelief in miracles and think of them as things that are kind of possible on this landscape of faith. Well, I don't want to get into new material too much now, but I do want to talk about, just use the miracle of St. Manos, which I talked about all the way at the first episode of last season, as an example here. Going back over the story, you know, there's this woman who's infertile, and all of her animals and servants are infertile, and she hears about, hey, St. Manos maybe can fix that. So she says, hey, if all of my animals and also me start having babies, then I will convert to Christianity. So she sends this egg that she has, that a chicken of hers laid. It's not going to hatch. They're not fertilized eggs. But she sends this egg with a boatsman up the Nile to the Church of St. Manos. And the boatsman forgets about the egg until about a week later when he's back at home. And he sees it under the bench of his boat, and he's like, well, I better eat this. And so he scrambles it up and he eats it. Then later on, he goes back to that Church of St. Manos to worship at Sunday service. And St. Manos, ghost St. Manos, because St. Manos is long dead at this point, just shows up and kicks this guy's ass and beats him up so badly that he poops out a chicken, a live chicken. The egg has reconstituted itself miraculously as a chicken. That's the miracle of St. Manos. And of course, the lady does, at the end of this kind of little fable, convert with all of her servants and all of her barnyard animals to Christianity. And they all have babies. So you can see that within the frame of the narrative, right, this miracle is about making conversions. It's about converting people. The lady who sends the egg is a candidate for conversion. The miracle converts her. But that converting power of miracles is part of the fiction of the text. This miracle story circulated exclusively in Christian communities. It would not have been one that non-believers even had access to, because the only version that we have surviving is in Old Nubian, which is a language that was only ever used in Christian societies. There may have been a Coptic version that predates this, which would also only have circulated in Christian societies. Both Old Nubian and Coptic are literacies that exist basically exclusively for use by Christians for Christians. Quite aside from the converting power of the text, as I talked about in that first episode, is that the miracle makes an argument about bodily resurrection. What it's doing is making this kind of doctrinal argument, saying bodily resurrection, the recreation of the body out of all of its parts, what happens to the chicken after the man scrambles the egg and eats it, is possible. That kind of bodily resurrection is possible. And this is a particular doctrinal position, a fairly commonplace one in late antique Christianity, but it's opposed to this kind of Platonic view that says, hey, our identity is just a form, we survive death as kind of a soul, and then our soul gets refilled with matter after the resurrection. So we get a body back, but it's not exactly the same body, atom for atom, as it was when we were alive. That's the Platonic view. That's the view that the miracle of St. Manos is attacking. So it's got that kind of argumentative value, and of course it also is great publicity for St. Manos. If you do a miracle like that, you come back from the dead to beat this guy up so that he poops out a chicken, you must be a friend of God, because you can't really do that if you're not a friend of God. So that's a miracle. It shows that you are, in fact, a saint. It's how St. Manos earns the title of being a saint, by doing miracles like that. But what I really want to think about here, maybe in a little bit more detail than I did the first time I talked about this story, is, what is it about this miracle that makes it miraculous, that makes it worthy of noticing, that makes it mirandum, needing to be noticed? The noticeable thing, the neat thing about this, I think, from the ancient point of view, and this connects to a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about the resurrection of the body, is that it inverts the digestive system. It turns the digestive system upside down. It turns the egg that the man eats into chicken rather than poop. Now, the equivalence between death and digestion is kind of a characteristic of late antique and medieval Christianity. They draw this: hell is an all-consuming dragon. When you die, you are eaten by that dragon, etc. This shows up in the pictorial imagination of Christianity. It's not really something that people talk about explicitly, but the miracle lets us notice them noticing this neat kind of inversion of the digestive tract. We probably wouldn't think that digestive inversion is the coolest thing that can happen, but for a resurrection-obsessed people such as the Christians, it is deeply significant. Well, so the Manos story is like pretty good, right? I mean, it's a pretty good miracle to make a chicken come out of a guy. The stuff we're getting into over the next few weeks is much worse. Um, Low-grade miracles, I mean, just the shittiest. So I hope that's something you can look forward to. I mean, a lot of these are even going to be maybe some tricks you can do yourself. Pull them on your friends and families, convince them that you are a saint or a friend of God, or perhaps even possessed by the devil. Anything to stay entertained during these trying times. Well, on that note, I hope to see you back again next week for the story of another horrible little miracle.